Hey there. I was reading a book recently about Salem, Massachusetts, actually, not far from where I live, and it had nothing to do with tarot specifically, other than that in one of the chapters, the author, it's a nonfiction book, goes to a series of readers, tarot readers, and his attitude is very upbeat and very positive. He's not super critical of the idea of reading. In fact, he's a fan of anything that has a metaphysical or spooky or otherworldly quality to it. So his attitude is pretty upbeat. But he goes to all these readers and he comes away feeling that the readers are very well meaning, but that the readings were all really sort of generally vague, that they are not super helpful and not all that insightful. I think that that is not an unusual critique of tarot readings because, well, I think there's a lot of reasons. But what I'm going to focus on right now is that general readings, in my opinion, yield general answers, and the more general the question, the more likely you are to get vague, sort of little white book esque readings out of them. So I wonder what this author would have felt if his experience involved a reader counseling him to ask a specific question, or after a general reading to say, what area of this interests you that we can dig deeper into, or even says, as a reader, this looks like an area we could dig deeper into, because we have an opportunity to change perceptions every time we read for someone else, and especially when it's someone who we're not close to. So if we're reading professionally, and I put that in quotation marks because I think everyone's aim should be to read with a professional quality, whether or not we're charging money for it. But if our aim is to read professionally, I think we have a responsibility to do as clear a reading as we can, and to for cause, so to speak, and to do our best to make the reading as specific to the person as we can. In the little segment I'm about to do, what I'm going to show is how, with the same group of cards, we can narrow a question, and even though the cards are staying the same, the more specific the question gets, the more specific the reading gets. And I think when we do that, people will walk away feeling like the reading was more useful and that the experience was better, and they're more likely to uh, be excited about readings and view it less as sort of a oh yeah, like a cute thing. Oh, isn't it cute that people do that? And not everyone has that attitude, but I've had readings. Many of the readings I've had from other people have been general or completely off. And it's frustrating, uh, but it is what it is. But where I think a lot of readers go wrong is not being specific enough. So and I've talked about this before, and it does marry into context because the I've talked about how the position of the cards in a reading affects context, but obviously the theme of the reading affects context too. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, I hope this helps. As always, I want to hear if it does. I want to hear if it doesn't, and I want to hear if there's anything you would like me to do a video on. So let's take a peek. Yes. So specificity. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to draw 3 cards, and I'm going to look at them from the point of view of a general question, and then from progressively more specific questions. This is the Prisma Visions Tarot, which I love. And I don't know. I have all these decks that I should be using, and Amint. Amint, is that a thing? Am not. I also picked up these silk scarves on Amazon, which normally when I do readings, I use either no cloth if the surface is fabric, or I use a just a plain muslin panel that I got at the fabric store, because I like the reading surface to be like a blank page that the words of the cards sort of spread out on. But sometimes I go into buying modes, and it was hard to resist, and they were not expensive. And people always recommend silk as a reading cloth. Silk is kind of a frustrating fabric, though. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is specificity. I have mentioned before that I was doing for a while the tarot school, Wald and Ruth Ann Amberstone's tarot school correspondence course, which is very intense, and it's worth doing. But I didn't finish it because for various reasons. One of which was that Wald gave me a reading, and he said something that wound up making me go back to school, and that ended up taking up a lot of time. Anyway, in that course somewhere they talk about that a reading ideally is three things. It's true, useful, or helpful and surprising. And if it can only be two of those things, it should be true and helpful. And if it can only be one of those things, it should be true. We're aiming as readers to be all three. So what I'm starting with right here is actually just an example of a 6-card general spread I use when I do them, because what it covers is the 5 elements and kind of a general overview. So we have fire, air, water, and earth, spirit, and then kind of a general contemplation. And I'm just showing you, this is really the only general spread I use. I'm not a big user of the Celtic Cross, although I did do a video on it, and it did show some interesting things. But I like a general reading to focus on at least some specific things. So this is one way I make a general reading specific, because I say, okay, fire is your passion, your vocation, the projects and things in life that you're meant to do or want to do, or that you're deeply creative about. Air is your intellect, your mind, issues of communication. Water is your friendships and relationships and feelings. Earth is your job, your family, your life, the day-to-day. Spirit is sort of whatever you want it to be in terms of what you believe. So this is your spiritual path, this is your spiritual health, your journey, your higher self, and then something that ties it all together. The reason that I like this, again, is because it does add specificity. And so, for general reading, someone may say, oh, I'm really curious about, for example, oh gosh, the tower. Why is my spiritual path so unsteady, for example? So that would be an interesting thing to explore a specific reading on. So a general reading could be grounds for starting a specific reading, and then I could go on and do a reading on that. What I'm going to do now, though, is just sort of look at like a normal 3-card reading, where someone doesn't have a question. They're like, just give me a general reading. So this isn't a real reading, so I'm not going to worry about pulling so many cards, but let's just get these. So person comes to us for a general reading. How's that looking? You can say it. Good. We draw the 7 of Pentacles, the Devil, and the 9 of Swords. So, I'm reading for my client, or my querent, and I'm looking at the 3 cards, and I don't necessarily use spread positions in 3-card readings, although I could. Again, spread positions are a way to add specificity where it's not there. But I tend to read, again, I've mentioned this before, but as Robert Place in his book about tarot, history, divination, and I always forget there's a third thing, but whatever that third thing is. And I love that book. I don't know why I can't remember it. I tend to read 3 cards sort of as one. And I've talked about this in other things, so I won't dwell on sort of where I kind of find things, but I look for the strongest energy. In this case, that's the Devil. So I might say to this person, there is a tendency to become addicted to work, and that's causing anxiety. All right, because we have the devil, the Seven of Pentacles, and the Nine of Swords. So you're in a space where you're really dealing with compulsive behavior. You're sort of compulsively planning, compulsively working, compulsively like trying to make your future stable and strong, and get things to grow, and that's causing you anxiety. You're feeling fear, you're feeling attacked, you're feeling a threat. So, not a terrible reading, assuming that I'm right about any of that. But this is more or less, they're very standard definitions. You know what I mean? Anxiety attack is sort of my key phrase for the Nine of Swords. Harvesting work, planning for the future is sort of keyword for the Seven of Pentacles, and the devil is traditionally addiction. So, it's pretty standard fare. Now, if I'm on the money, they may be impressed by that. But all I've said is I see this thing happening. So you're addicted to work and it's making you anxious. You don't necessarily need a reading to know that, although sometimes hearing someone else say it can help. Now, what happens if this becomes a question about someone's love life? And so they say, well, give me a reading about my love life. Now I have some more to think about, and I have some more things to work through. For example, there's no cups cards. There's no wands cards. So there's no water, there's no fire. So emotion and passion are missing from this reading. So there's something I can think about. The devil can be an abusive relationship. It can also be kind of a kinky relationship. So there is something for me to think about there. The Seven of Pentacles is not a card that's traditionally associated with relationships, because it is so much about yielding the fruit of harvest. And the Nine of Swords could be relationship related, but it's very intellectual, it's very mental. But if I'm reading this for someone who's asking generally about their love life, what I might do is everything kind of changes. I'm looking at the cards now, and instead of the devil being my strongest energy, I'm tempted. And by the way, this is just all instinct. You just go with it. But I'm tempted to start with the Seven of Pentacles, the devil, and then the Nine of Swords as ABC, as 1, 2, 3. So you are feeling the harvest of the relationship. It's been a lot of work. You've planted a lot of seeds to get that relationship where you want it to be, and it's really flourishing. But there's some compulsion there, or some addiction to the relationship. Your possession of it, your interest in holding it onto it, and sort of trapping the relationship and making it stay where it is keeping you up at night, and it's making you afraid. You're not losing anything, though. Like, this is good because it's yielding results, but your clinginess, your desire to entrap the person, is creating a huge amount of anxiety, a huge amount of fear, and it's causing you to be almost crippled with worry that you're gonna lose what you have. So this is a case of non-attachment in a way. So everything's good, but your terror that you're gonna lose is causing you to cling to the relationship, which can do damage to it. There's also the thing of anything that grows eventually has to fade. And so having discovered what the relationship has yielded for you, that neediness is coming into play, because you don't want to lose all the work you've put into it. Again, general, right? Because I'm trying to do these quickly, but you sort of get the point that the meaning of the cards changes and gets more specific as the question becomes more focused. If the question becomes, how do I fix my relationship because I feel like it's broken, again, that's even more specific. So my context and my question makes me reevaluate everything I'm seeing here, because especially these two cards, are not traditionally, they're not stereotypically positive, even though this one is. But I'm getting a question about action, about work. How do I fix what's broken, or how do I fix what feels like it's broken? The Seven of Pentacles is a good way to do that, especially in this particular deck, because it varies from Rider Waite. Can you see that? Is the glare? No, you can see that. It varies from Rider Waite in that it's hard to tell whether this person is harvesting or planting, and so, as we know, the deck choice we use will change the meaning as well. But how do I fix what's broken? Well, I need to get down into the dirt and start planting the seeds of the future. I need to really invest energy and effort into developing the next stage of that relationship. I may need to find sexy ways of spicing things up. Because the devil, as I mentioned earlier, can have slightly a kinky tone to it. So where can I find darker, deeper, more forbidden, theoretically, moments? I'm trying not to be gross, but you know what I mean? Where do you find sort of sexier, darker, is it role playing? Is it sort of, BDSM sort of stuff? Who knows? But the Nine of Swords, in this case, means that you're going to have to reckon with inevitable fear. So it's going to be there. You're going to have to kind of cut through the fear. So doing this work, finding new ways, and recognizing that there are going to be times when you're going to be anxious, but that you can't let that anxiety kill the spark of the relationship. It's, as Buddhists say, suffering is, anxiety is. You're gonna fear loss, but you're gonna do the work, and you're gonna find ways of spicing things up, and that can alleviate the anxiety and then help you refocus on the work and spicing things up and alleviating the anxiety. So in this case, we get kind of a cyclical relationship to the cards. Again, we could keep going. I wanna move this along. But you get the point. As the question gets more specific, the meanings get more specific, clear, and different. And in my very first reading with these three cards, what I gave were fairly standard issue little white book definitions. Harvesting results, addiction, fear. This card has meant fear in some formation in every permutation of the reading that I've done based on the question, but the kind of fear has been different. In the most recent, the last of the ones that I did, this was about recognizing the existence of anxiety and accepting it as inevitable and not letting it crush the work. In previous readings, it was about being crippled with anxiety. It was about, oh God, I have to go back and watch. I've already forgotten. What was it about in the first? It was in the first love relationship one. I've forgotten. Anyway, you get the point. The kind of fear and its relationship to the question changed. This went from being addiction to being, again, in the second reading, having an addictive quality, and then in the third reading being about sex. This went from being about harvesting the results of something to planting the seeds of something. So the question colors the meaning, but the specificity, and if this were a real person, with a real question, it's likely that you would have even more specificity. So this is, I try to make these so short and they never end up that way, but the point is, if you can encourage and work with your querent and come up with something specific, it's more likely that the reading will touch their lives in a deeper way, feel closer to their actual experience, be more helpful and productive, and they're less likely to walk away feeling like, oh, isn't that cute? Like, they kind of got it, or they kind of saw this thing, or, they didn't see anything at all. So, that's that. Now, I think I said this in the introduction. We can't bully our querents into a reading they don't want. And so if they do want a general reading, finding a general spread that you're really comfortable with and that has positions that feel appropriate and that help you read well, is good. Whether that's the Celtic cross or I call this the star spread, the pentacle spread, um, because I've always viewed the points of the pentacle as each of the elements. So again, fire, air, water, earth, spirit, and sort of summary. And what I like to do with this reading is sort of look at this card, sometimes in relationship to all the five, or as a punctuation mark. It depends. So, but again, we can work with our querents to make their reading better. And I will often say to someone who I'm reading for, the more I know, you can tell me, I always say to people I read for, you can tell me whatever you want. You can be as specific as you want, or you can be as vague as you want. The more I know, the more you share with me, the easier it is for me to tie what I'm seeing in the cards to your experience. But if you don't want me to know that and you don't feel comfortable sharing, don't. If you're testing me, then test me. That's another thing, is that sometimes people come to tarot readings with the impulse to see how good the reader is. They're testing to see what you see. Again, if that's the case, general questions yield general answers, and it's a good thing to say at the beginning. You don't necessarily know when someone's testing you, but, telling them, at the beginning, hey, I'm happy to do a reading for you. I'll read for whatever you want. The more general the reading is, the more general the answers will be. The more specific we can get, the more specific I can be for you. And that's that. So we're not here to school our querents or our clients, but what we are here to do is, especially if we're taking money or trade, whatever the bartering, whatever the case is, to do our best and to get the most out of it. And I feel like the more specific we get, the better the reading is. So I will stop saying the same thing over and over again, if anyone's even still watching this. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know your thoughts, and have a great week.